Welcome back. Richard Beam from the Veterans Administration Building down in Long Beach is here, but we're going to talk about our local VA offices and what they provide. Well, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So you are out of the Long Beach office.
Correct.
Or why don't you tell me a little bit about you and how you got involved with the VA?
That is an interesting question. I'm not a veteran myself, but in my family I've got veterans probably going back 3 or 4 generations, siblings as well. And it was mostly by happenstance that I ended up working for the VA. I've been there about just over 15 years, and I would say I joke regularly that it is both the best and worst job I've ever had in my life. It's sometimes hard to work for a government agency as large as we are, because it's hard to affect change as quickly as many of us would like, whether they're the employee or the veteran that's coming for care.
Right.
But if at the end of my life I need to know what have I done, and by this job I think that I could answer questions clearly, what have I done for my fellow man or fellow woman? So those are the best aspects when you can really contribute something to a population of people that have done so much for the rest of us. Right. So that's how I got there. That's why I stay there, and that gets me through rough days.
Good for you. I mean, that's a very nice answer, and so we appreciate all your help.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about the Veterans Administration as a whole.
Sure. VA is actually one giant agency that has 3 main parts to it, what we call administrations. You've got the Veterans Benefits Administration, which handles VA home loans, post 9/11 GI Bill, compensation and claims for injuries that you may have sustained while in uniform. That's the benefits side of the house. And then the second part is Veterans Health Administration, which provides the traditional health care to veterans that we hear or read a lot about. It's the largest of all the entities within VA. And the third one is the national cemeteries, Riverside National Cemetery and the Los Angeles National Cemetery. Okay. Those are the 3 parts, but my portion that I represent is the Veterans Health Administration, and within that, it's the VA Long Beach healthcare system. Okay. Which is the main medical center, the Tiber Rubin VA Medical Center that's in Long Beach. And then we have about 4 or 5 clinics that are in different parts of the community, some in Orange County. We have 3 in Orange County, and they have another one in Whittier, Santa Fe Springs, and another smaller one out in the north side of Long Beach. Okay,
so the one that's closest here is the Laguna Hills one, the Laguna Clinic. So let's talk about that one specifically.
Sure.
What does it provide?
So Laguna Hills Clinic provides basic primary care. You can do basic labs. They'll come in and will address anything that's predominantly primary care in the same way that your general primary care or your general practitioner provides in the community. Anything above that or beyond that that requires specialization, maybe special labs, special radiology, then they will refer you back up to Long Beach or potentially to services that we have in Santa Ana. The Santa Ana Clinic is a little bit more augmented with audiology, some optometry, better radiology, but any of the specialized services, the veteran still has to go back up to Long Beach to get the vast majority of that.
Okay. And then before we were on camera, we were talking a little bit about collaborations that you guys might do. So specifically, if somebody has a particular need and maybe the Veterans Administration can't provide it or doesn't have the appropriate doctors and things, how do you collaborate with outside sources?
There's a lot of instances where the VA would choose to partner with our outside community care. It could be a situation where it's 911 and the 911 system is going to take you to the closest hospital, not necessarily to the closest VA. So we utilize or we support veterans getting emergency care in our community emergency rooms. There are other times when, due to capacity, maybe the wait at my hospital is too long to get them in, then we may use a contract to provide those services closer to home in the community that the veteran lives in, that gets them in there quicker or sooner. Okay. And when we talk about services that we might not provide at the VA, there's a balancing act we have between ensuring that if VA doesn't provide the service, which we have a huge number of programs we do, but if we are going to look at providing services out in the community, we have to make sure that it's evidence-based care. And that's because we're using taxpayers' money to buy a service in the community, and the taxpayer expects that we're not frivolous with that, but that we really do look for modalities or ways of care that are evidence-based and have shown good efficacy in a research or a comparable way, so that the taxpayer's getting and the veteran is receiving the care that they should. And we also recognize, part of what you and I talked about is that the VA is not the solution for every person. So if we come to a place where the veteran needs something that may be different than what we have, or maybe they need more services for their family, which we're not allowed to care for the family or children or uncles, dads, grandmothers, whatever it may be, we might refer a veteran to an outside resource that is more able, by restrictions, policy, legislation, whatever it may be, to get that care somewhere else. I don't think the VA is very important. We understand the culture of veterans, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, better than anybody else out there. But as our want is to make veterans whole, we have to come to recognize that VA might not be the solution for everybody. So if we can pull in partners in the community that are bona fide, we want our veterans to have access to the best possible life they can have. So may not always be us.
Okay, so let's talk then about some of the programs that Veterans Administration has. So for instance, telehealth, what does that mean? So
VA has tried to figure out with both our older veterans and our younger veterans, what is the best way to get a veteran engaged in care short term and also longitudinally, given that the roles of younger generations or even some of our older generation veterans has changed. Our lives are filled with work, school, kids, and healthcare is kind of one of the last things that we tend to think about, especially us men. We'll drag our leg behind us to the emergency room when it's well beyond what we should have done. So VA has tried to look at different ways to engage our younger veterans and our older veterans that want to use new technology. Telehealth, mobile apps, online services on your community that they can reach out and engage with us for things that are not necessarily acute medical care, but if you're in bed midnight, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, you may want to text or send a question in that doesn't necessarily require a visit to the doctor, but you still have a question. So we're trying to find different ways that will allow our veterans to engage with us, a government agency, on their terms instead of our terms. So with that, telehealth is something that we're able to use. FaceTime, it's not exactly FaceTime, very similar. A computer, cell phone, a tablet that has a screen on it that we can connect our care providers with a patient that may be at home, they could be out of state, they could be busy, but it allows them still to connect with us. My Healthy Vet is one of those programs. Telehealth, we've got about 20 different apps that you can Google and find. If you type in VA apps, or the App Store, VA App Store, you'll find about 20 different apps that you can download right now on your cell phone to help with PTSD, weight management. There are apps to connect, again, with your clinician. There's a number of different ways, smoking cessation programs that you can do on your time and not our time, but it keeps you, or it makes it a little bit more easier for you to stay engaged and to keep moving forward or committed to your health goals.
I like that. When's the DMV going to come up with that kind of stuff? Gosh, what we would give to have a mobile app for that. All right, so home health, and then you also have a mail-in pharmacy. What does that mean?
Yeah, so traditionally, we recognize that, again, not every interaction of healthcare requires that you drive to Long Beach or drive to your clinic to get it. So obviously, we want to see a veteran first to find out what's going on, do a health assessment, and get a benchmark of where they're at right now. And if they require a medication that fits within a certain criteria, meaning we don't do a lot of narcotics by mail, we don't do certain classes of drugs, pain medications, exclusively by mail. But when we can, we will mail the refill of the prescription directly to the veteran themselves, so that they don't have to go out in the community, they don't have to come see us, it'll get shipped directly to their home.
Yeah, and I will actually compliment the VA. My father, he moved from California to Texas, and so he had to get a lot of his stuff ahead of time. They were great. They got him everything he needed, and then once he got to Texas, then he went to that VA there. But it was definitely different, but they helped him a lot, so that was nice. Yeah,
the amazing thing about the VA is that because it's a national healthcare system, anything that I do with a veteran at any of our clinics, the hospital, Laguna Woods, doesn't matter, anything that we do is in the medical record that is accessible anywhere in the country. So that if you left here today and at 5 o'clock you were in a different state at a different VA, they can pull up your medical records and know exactly what you talked about with your clinician earlier in the day. When Hurricane Katrina hit, VA was one of the few, if any other, healthcare providers that knew exactly what those patients needed, because at the time they had to evacuate thousands of veterans out of the Louisiana area to surrounding states, but there was no interruption in their care because we knew exactly where they were based on our medical record system that was nationwide.
And the healthcare systems are now moving towards something like that called precision care. So yeah, they're doing a lot
It's
of
a
that
plus.
now. So you guys definitely led everybody else the way to that. So let's talk about real quick some of the changes that you had mentioned, I guess legislation and some other things.
Sure. So a number of years ago, when VA found issues with access to care and that people were waiting too long to get access to care, Congress stepped in to support the VA and created what they called the Choice Act. The Choice Act set parameters both by mileage, how far away the veteran lived from the VA, but also time to get an appointment. And if you were outside of 40 miles of distance, 30 miles of distance, or 30 days to get access to care, then we were legally authorized to provide or pay for that care out in the community. It was a great program. It had a lot of benefits, but it also had some challenges. So moving forward, Congress has again come back to say that we need to look at this legislation again. We need to update it and figure out what went wrong in the first piece of legislation, improve it. And now that is in the hands of VA back in DC to figure out how do we operationalize the legislation that is passed. So we would imagine sometime in this summer, is what I'm guessing, we'll have definitive concrete instructions that will tell us what the new parameters are, and then how is it, the machinations for us to allow a veteran to go see somebody in the community. So they're looking at not just miles anymore, they're also looking at the length of time. We know here in Southern California that if you have to drive 20 miles, depending on where you live in Southern California, 20 miles can be 20 minutes or it could be an hour and a half.
That's right.
So now we're taking some of those things into consideration so that it makes it a little bit more pliable for the veteran to actually access care quicker, sooner, and maybe hopefully closer to where they live. So we won't know yet how that will all play out, but we're excited to see what the new legislation will bring because we think it'll add a lot of value to our veterans that don't have to go back to the mothership, but maybe be able to get it closer to home.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
A lot of great information. All right. And remember, if you need any information about what we've just talked about, including the apps or any services, you can always go to www.va.gov. We'll be right back. Thank you. That was great.
You're welcome.